that her, okay, this being, okay. So it's painful in some ways for me, but I'm also really happy for Val that she comes to the end of her time with an incredible record of achievement for the Big East. So let me bring you way back into the time machine. And back in 2013, the Big East was imploding because schools were leaving, football schools, for what they thought was a happier place for them. And we were accepting schools into the Big East that brought no value to the basketball brand, that was all about servicing football. And at that point in time, the original founders of the Big East realized that in order to make the basketball brand back to what it was, to keep its value, that we needed to separate from the football schools. And so we had a big divorce from the football schools. We came to a meeting, ironically for me, at that time I was at Providence, it was at St. John's, and we said, we have to do a reboot and a rebrand. And we have to focus on basketball excellence because football was depriving us of the value of our basketball brand. And when we did that, we knew we needed a leader that could parlay our basketball excellence and our brand and our East Coast metropolitan marketplaces into a conference that could succeed and compete with conferences that had much more revenue from football than we have. And under Val's tenure, she has done that. We were attracted to her because of her basketball background with the WNBA, and she has succeeded in shepherding what I think we're like a unicorn conference into continued basketball excellence over the 13 years that she has been president. And I think it's one of the underwritten stories in college athletics is that we've been successful in basketball for national championships. In men's basketball, we've been successful in women's basketball, witness UConn last year and this year. And it's all attributable to Val's leadership, her strategic vision, the relationships that she's cultivated with key partners like Fox and Madison Square Garden. When we left the old Big East, we left a lot of money behind to keep the name, to keep the brand, to keep Madison Square Garden. And all of those have proved to be wise moves on our part. And we've had a great run of 13 years under Val's leadership. And we're going to be hard pressed to find somebody to fill her shoes, but that's another question. And I will turn the microphone over to the woman that made all our success possible, Val Ackerman. Val?
Oh, I'm recovering from that one. Thank you. Thanks, Father Shanley. So this has been a dream job. And I can't thank the presidents of our 11 schools enough for entrusting me with the responsibility and the honor of leading this venerable organization when I was hired back in 2013. I want to especially thank Father Shanley, Father Peter Donahue at Villanova, and Jim Danko at Butler. They were They were in their current jobs back then. And they're still with the Big East today. And they've been leading us ever since, including as Big East board chairs at varying times. I also want to acknowledge Jack DeGioia, former president at Georgetown, and Father Daniel Hendrickson at Creighton, who it was also a pleasure to work with during the periods when they were also Big East board chairs. They've all rotated through over the last 13 years. I want to apologize if the news of my retirement appears sudden or surprising, particularly to anybody on the call who has been with me in recent days and weeks. I accept that you probably didn't see this coming. What I would say is that the decision came after a lot of reflection over the last several months, maybe a bit more, and was as simple as believing that I'm no kid anymore. I've worked what I hope will be seen as a good shift. And I really believe the time is right to hand off the baton and set in motion a transition to the next phase of my life and the next phase of the Big East. As many of you know, my career in sports has been a long one. I'm 66 years old. I'm now in my 38th year in the business. It's been an amazing ride for me. I'll be forever grateful to Gary Bettman for hiring me as staff attorney at the NBA in 1988 when he was the league's general counsel and before he left for the NHL. I truly learned from the best at the NBA league office, working under David Stern, longtime commissioner Russ Granick, at that time head of NBA properties Rick Welts, and getting to work on the first Dream Team that played in Barcelona and the USA basketball women's national team that won gold in Atlanta, of course, being part of the launch in the early years of the WNBA were all career highs for me. I feel like I've been a front row witness to so many exciting changes that have happened in sports and the game of basketball over the past 4 decades. And I put the Big East and what we've experienced here at the top of the list. My grandfather and my father worked in sports in my home state of New Jersey, mostly at the high school level. And so this line of work has been in my blood, but it's a journey I never could have imagined. My work with the Big East has brought me full circle in some ways. First, because it brought me back to my days as a student athlete at the University of Virginia in the early years of Title IX. And second, because I had the privilege of knowing and working with Dave Gavitt in the early 90s when he was the head of this great organization. He was also had leadership positions with USA Basketball and the Basketball Hall of Fame. And so the opportunity to lead the league that this great steward of the game founded has added a special layer of meaning to my Big East role. I'm not exactly sure what the future holds, but I look forward to being with my family, traveling a bit less, sleeping a bit more, and taking up some old and new pursuits while my health is good and my energy level is still pretty high. As for the Big East, I believe we've done what we could do with the support of our presidents and our schools to put the conference in the best possible position to remain a basketball powerhouse and to fulfill other objectives that our schools have. To be sure, we are dealing, what our schools are dealing with on the front lines of college basketball right now is very challenging. Truth be told, the same can be said for schools and other conferences around the country, just the nature of the environment at this moment in time. As a commissioner, my days are now filled with conversations and meetings about what can be done around the legal chaos, the rising costs, the interventions of state judges and attorneys general, and the seeming inability of the NCAA to pass and enforce basic rules that we think are necessary to support fair competition. We, like other leagues, are concerned about the rash of eligibility challenges that have hit in recent months, and the ongoing threat of student athlete employment, which we do not favor. And it's our hope that Congress can and will be persuaded to intervene to reconcile the various federal laws that are now sort of colliding in the college sector and begin to restore some stability to programs like ours and others around the country. But as we wrestle with all of those challenges, and while our schools don't have, as Father Shanley noted, the same resource levels as schools that we think of as peers in basketball, we have worked hard to make sure that other pillars are in place to help keep us nationally competitive. First and foremost, we have broadened prime national TV now through 2031. And on that score, I want to extend a special thanks to Eric Shanks and Jordan Bazan at Fox Sports, Rick Cordella at NBC, Peacock, Luis Silberwasser at TNT Sports, and Jimmy Pitaro at ESPN for supporting our schools through our current multi-network media rights packages. I want to thank Jim Dolan and Joel Fisher. Thanks to them, we have a deal to play the Big East Men's Tournament at Madison Square Garden through 2032, which will represent the event's 50th year at the world's most famous arena. In the past year, we've also extended our agreement to play our women's tournament at Mohegan Sun through 2029. We've renewed our corporate sales agency agreement with Playfly Sports through 2031. And we're at the start of a new conference office lease at the Empire State Building that'll take us through 2032. We also have very strong leadership on our campuses. I can tell you that the Big East of today would not be here without the efforts of our presidents, our ADs, our SWAs, our coaches, all of their staffs, and our passionate fan and donor bases. So with all of that, I know that the future of the Big East will be in great hands because of all of their efforts. My successor will also inherit one of the most capable conference office staffs in the NCAA. I have been so fortunate to have shared so many indelible moments over the past 13 years with such a talented and hardworking group of colleagues, past and present. I want to thank my team because, as I've told them, they've met every challenge, they've made the most of every opportunity, and they've made me very proud. And it's been an honor to be associated with them. I also want to extend a very big thanks to Joe Lasessi at Proskauer for the sage counsel that he's provided to me in the conference office over the past 13 years. For the Big East historians that may be on the call today, after helping shepherd the conference through the seismic changes in 2012 and 2013 that Father Shanley described and that allowed the new Big East to rise up out of the ashes, Joe donned a landlord's hat as he kindly allowed me and my then growing staff to take up residence in Proskauer's Times Square offices for 14 months as we were relocating the operation from Providence to New York City. That was really helpful because it gave us and me time to focus on the many other tasks that needed to be done in order to get the league up and running back then. And that was a very welcome accommodation. Finally, I want to thank the journalists who cover the league, print and electronic. Many of you I've had a chance to know for the time and the energy that you all expend telling our stories and bringing Big East news and notes and commentary to our fans. Our appreciation for all of you is why we brought back the Big East Media Award in 2019, our way of saying thanks. And then last but not least, I just want to say as a product of Title IX, I am so proud of how far women's college sports and women's sports and women in sports have come over the past 50 years. I'm sitting here today because of the experience that I had at the University of Virginia. And whatever we do, I just, would say, I hope we can ensure that women and girls don't go backwards with respect to sports participation opportunities. Because that experience, I can tell you from personal experience, is unrivaled in so many ways in the way that it advances women in society and strengthens the overall leadership pipeline, whatever sector that might be. So with that, I just want to thank everybody who's on this call for joining in and for the relationships I have with many of you. And with that, Mike, I'm going to turn it back to you to see if we have any questions.
Great, thanks, Val. Again, a reminder, if you have a question for either Commissioner Ackerman or Father Shanley, please use the hand raise button. So we will start with Dom Amore from the Hartford Courant.
Good morning, Val.
Hey, Dom, good morning.
Yep, congratulations, first of all, and best of luck to you.
Thank you.
I had really two questions that I'll try to just squeeze them in now while I have the mic. I think we talked about this many years ago, but in your career, you've taken on two projects that, in the perception, would be had the odds stacked against them, right? The WNBA and the new Big East in the FBS-dominated world. And you made both of those you succeed. What was the secret sauce, if that's what you want to call it, or the mindset or the philosophy that allowed you to do that? And then I would be remiss, of course, if I didn't ask how important the reintroduction of UConn into the Big East, has kind of kickstarted or supercharged the success the league's had in the last years. But I do want to get to the WNBA Big East, that challenges that you took on and how you succeeded with them.
Yeah, thanks, Dom. Well, how lucky was I to be able to work on these two incredible initiatives? Similar in some ways, very different in others. With the WNBA, we were in effect launching a brand new property, but one that was branded with the best brand in the sport of basketball in the NBA. And when we launched the league, we had the benefit of all of that infrastructure. The staff at the NBA league office, the network partners that they brought to the WNBA, the business partners, and of course, all the apparatus that we had in all of our team markets, because the launch model for the WNBA was to set up shop in places where we had an NBA team and where the NBA team was the operator of the WNBA team. So we had all of this sort of pre-built, and it was just a matter of sort of thoughtfully mobilizing all of those assets. Number one. And number two, introducing women's professional basketball to the world in a whole new way. Because that was, that had not worked with prior endeavors to get women's pro basketball going. And so the beauty of it for me was that I was in-house. I knew the people. David Stern, Rick Welts, and Russ Granick were deeply involved. We had other senior executives who were a big part of things. And so while it was really hard to bring a new league online from scratch, there was a lot of infrastructure and resources to support the endeavor. Fast forward to the Big East, it's somewhat different. I mean, here we were relaunching a brand that many people had a very strong opinion about. This league that had been wildly successful after its launch, had put 3 teams into the NCAA Final Four in the mid-'80s, had a collection of iconic, colorful Hall of Fame quality coaches in Coach Carnesecca and Coach Thompson and Coach Massimino and Coach Boeheim and Coach Calhoun, the list, Coach Carlissimo, the list goes on and on and on. People knew what the Big East was, and as Father Shanley detailed, sort of the sort of the forces of history sort of sent it off in a different direction after this glorious start and then the great successes that followed that. And so the charge for us was to try to bring that back and to try to recreate in many ways what the Big East had been. So people knew what it was, and the job was, okay, how do we do that again? And the challenge, though, for me was I didn't have any infrastructure when we got this going again. The old infrastructure, was back in the American. Of course, they had to rename because Father Shanley and the presidents and Joe Lasesi and the presidents at that time took the Big East name, and the intellectual property and all the record books. So they had to rebrand, but they had all the stuff. They had the people and the office and the website and all that. We had to recreate all that from scratch. And so for me, it was actually in many ways a harder assignment because, we had to rebuild, and it was very much a startup. And on that score, I just want to thank our schools because everybody at that point sort of chipped in. I had to build my staff again. We didn't have an office. I was sort of working off my iPhone. Took a while to get a Big East email account set up for everybody. And my staff believed me when I told them that I would eventually get them a benefits plan after I hired them. That took a few months. But really, I would just say, Dom, two very different kinds of challenges. And I guess, I went into both of them probably not knowing what I was in for. Just thinking it would all work out for the best, relying on my resourcefulness to get the people involved that needed to be involved, because endeavors like this really take a village. And that's what it took in both cases. And I'm, again, very fortunate that I had the village around me to help make that happen. On the answer to your second question is, adding back UConn was a major move for us. And a very, a one that has paid dividends all the way around. I hope, the UConn leadership would agree. It's been a win-win. Father Shanley and I, in fact, were part of early discussions with UConn that didn't quite pan out. There were sort of a couple of approaches and conversations that finally materialized in 2019 when David Benedict and I began quietly having conversations about the possibility of them returning. It took a little while to sort of square away what that would involve and what the deal terms would be. And then it came to be. And I want to thank then President Susan Herbst and David and the UConn board for making that possible. We knew implicitly what they would bring in terms of the history and the geography and what they would add in basketball, men and women. There were some questions early on that Father Shanley could attest to about sort of how they fit as an institution in the new Big East, given that they were joining a league of 10 privates, 9 Catholic schools, when they have a very different profile from all that. But we kind of got past that, and we sort of looked at the ledger and we saw all these benefits of them coming back. And it was sort of became at the end of the day, an easy and unanimous decision. So we're thrilled to have them. They've been not only, very successful outwardly, what all of you would see, but they've been really great partners. They've hosted events for us. David and Dr. Merrick have been leaders in our meeting rooms. David's been involved with the various NCAA committees. And so as I said, they've been partners in the truest sense of the word. So we've been thrilled to have them. And they have certainly, helped enrich this chapter of the Big East's history.
Great. We'll go next to Charles Hallman from the Minnesota Spokesman Record.
It's Minnesota Spokesman Recorder. Hello, Val. How are you?
Good. Hey, Charles.
Good to see you. Over the years, we have talked many times about diversity in college sport on all levels. Now that you are leaving your position, how do you see that it's grown over the years? And if you have any final thoughts or any continuing thoughts about the new CBA and the WNBA, because of course you was part of the building of that and seeing the significance of that new agreement.
Well, on the first one, Charles, I continue to believe, and my presidents have heard me loud and clear on this, that diversity is critically important in the sports business. Our athlete populations are as diverse as it gets. We've got people of all of genders, gender diversity, racial diversity, ethnic diversity across the board in sports leagues and outlets across the country. And so for me, it just makes perfect sense that our leadership ranks should reflect our athlete populations. And so I have been and will continue to be an advocate for that. I'm proud of the Big East because I really feel like we have been a leader in pushing these themes. We were forming working groups on this topic years ago before it became common. We're proud of our Be the Change initiative, which is our attempt to create a platform around the themes of inclusion and belonging on our campuses and respect for people and tolerance and all the things that, I think our country is supposed to stand for. And so it's my hope, it'll be up to the, to the conference after I'm gone to decide, how far they want to lean into these themes. But I know for me, it's been critically important. And I really do hope that the Big East stays true to its longstanding values on these subjects, because I'm not alone in my thinking about this. See Coach Thompson and everything that he represented on this score many years ago. As it relates to the WNBA, Charles, I'll just say, I wasn't privy, of course, to the negotiations, but thrilled to see a deal of this magnitude come to be. The players are clearly very deserving. That's what leagues are all about. It's fan interest in them, what they do as individuals, what they do as teams, what the rivalries mean to people. It was the dream when we started the league that it would get to that point, that the players would be making significant salaries, and that the fan support would be at a high level, and that the networks and the sponsors and the writers would be sort of clamoring to showcase these great women. And so for somebody like me, I'm thrilled to see that it happened. It fulfills the dream that we had in the beginning. And I know under the leadership of Kathy Engelbert and Adam Silver and everybody's associated with both leagues, that the future of the WNBA looks bright, and I'm sure will be even brighter than it is today.
Thank you very much. Congratulations and good luck.
Thank you.
We'll go next. KMAX Sports.
Hi, Val. How are you?
Kevin, how are you today?
Hey, congratulations, and thanks for keeping the Big East very enjoyable to cover. That's I think we all are in that same boat. Val, you were on the committee, the NCAA committee that began starting a study of NIL about 5 years ago. It probably hasn't turned out the way everyone was looking at it 5 years ago. If you can maybe predict a model that you would think could work for the Big East going forward, what would it look like?
Well, I would say on that score, Kevin, the early working groups on NIL, we quit, I'll speak on behalf of my colleagues on the first one. We did believe strongly that the time was right for student athletes to have these income opportunities that were coming to regular students, if you will, as a matter of course. The questions that we posed were, how are we going to make this work in our world, where we have recruiting, where we have an environment where athletes can switch schools, where we have an interest, because of the nature of higher education, in maintaining academic primacy, which could be compromised if athletes are switching schools frequently, and where we had concerns about cost control. And so these are the things that we wrestled with. And frankly, I think our space is still wrestling with. I would tell you that when you said, did it turn out the way you expected? To be honest, there's nothing that we predicted that would happen that hasn't happened. We suspected this would be really challenging to make this work. The one thing we didn't foresee was the formation of collectives. We were sort of focused on individual boosters or donors at individual schools, wanting to be aggressive in terms of helping their schools with athlete acquisition. But what we didn't foresee sort of packs of them forming to pool their money and everything that sort of has flowed from the collective environment. That was something that we, hadn't planned on. And that's created its own sort of, to-do list in terms of how to manage. In terms of the answers, I think, like many in my position, it's probably going to take Congress. It seems, counterintuitive in some ways, given how long it takes Congress sometimes to make decisions and to move big ideas forward. But if Congress can somehow get involved and reconcile the application of the antitrust laws as it relates to college sports, so that the NCAA can make rules without the constant threat of litigation and the constant fact of litigation, that would go a long way. Right now, we're dealing with eligibility challenges that we hadn't foreseen even a year or two ago. Who knew that student athletes would want to stay for more than 4 years? If they weren't hurt. Who knew that athletes would want to come back from the pros and rejoin their college teams because they could make more money there than they could in the G League. Who knew any of this would happen? And that's really, in our judgment, not what college sports is supposed to be about. So if we can get it back to where we were, where the NCAA is the national governing body, can make rules around basics, eligibility, player movement. We can come up with some mechanism to manage costs in a way that's fair to the athletes. And how we do that without employment is not clear to me. Having come out of the pro space, I bore witness to the effects of collective bargaining in a sports organization. And what that does is that it gives the athletes voice, and it gives the quote employer some protections around the restrictions. Why? Because the athletes have agreed to the restrictions. We need to get to something like that in college sports. If it can be done without employment, all the better. And so those are among the discussions that are being had with Congress. So if we can get that to happen, if we can get some protection for the NCAA, if we can sort of keep the states involved in a reasonable way, but not in a disruptive way, which is what's happening now, if we can get some controls over agent behavior, and back to my earlier point, if we can make sure all the while that women's sports are protected in the ways they need to be protected, and these participation opportunities don't go away, I think we will have won, because college sports is worth fighting for. There's so much about it that's great. That's what makes the Big East so special, because I think we have been able to hold on to the things that make college sports great. And I think the twist now is we may need some federal help in order to keep all of those things going.
And hey, maybe a follow-up for Father Shanley. Father, the time frame on a replacement, and maybe what that you think the qualifications, what Val's replacement may look like.
Well, we're looking for someone who can, this is the verb, we're looking for somebody that can adapt to the environment that we're in right now. And Val has just outlined the litany of new complications that are a part of college basketball. The portal ends today. And I know here at St. John's, we're trying to recruit basically a whole new team, which is what's going on. So people have asked me, like, what are we looking for? I don't think that we yet have a real sense of what kind of person. It's going to be a unique set of skills that we need to be successful going forward. So, Val was a little bit out of the box coming out of the WNBA world, and we're open to whoever can wow us and see a vision about how we can be successful in the changing landscape that we're in. But it's too early for us to really know who's out there. I'm hoping, I've already gotten emails from people who think they're the next best thing for the Big East, and we'll see as it goes forward who really is the right person.
Great. Our next question comes from Howard Megdal from the 9.
Val, congratulations on
Hi,
all
Howard.
you have done. Hi, Val.
Thank you, Howard. Great to see you.
Great to see you always. I have sort of a 1A and a 1B question here. Obviously, having had the experience you have and what you've done here with the Big East, I'm wondering how much you believe the basketball first model can and in some ways will be taken up by other conferences as a way forward. And just related to it, obviously, it's really significant that women's sports are obviously well represented with women's basketball specifically, economically, with the fact that there are now unit payouts for women's basketball teams that advance in the NCAA tournament. So related to it, how much you think the basketball first model can and will be an engine to drive women's sports moving forward as well.
Yeah, got it. Thanks, Howard. Well, Father Shanley's the historian here, and he's the one that can speak firsthand about how the old Big East started out as a basketball league. Football became part of the equation, and then tensions surfaced. I remember reading about those before I got hired, and that led to the breakup in 2012/2013. And so I know for our group of schools, basketball first was, was what they wanted to get back to, because they had lived the battles trying to sort of manage what it takes to run a basketball operation when you've got football interests dominating in most cases.
Mhm.
So I think the Big East is Exhibit A of what can happen when you go back to the roots and make it a basketball first operation. I do think it's hard to know, who has the advantage here. I get asked all the time. Hey, people say, hey, the Big East, you guys our coaches are worried about you, your basketball coaches, because you guys have going to spend all your money from rev share on basketball. And, we kind of chuckle because that's true. I mean, we don't have to pay football players. I won't speak for UConn and what Dave Benedict is doing with his team, his FBS team on that. But, our schools can go right to the basketball rosters and invest there without having football expense to cover. But at the same time, we don't have their revenues. I mean, just a fact. I mean, for better or worse for us, the revenues in college sports are mostly centered around football media rights.
Mhm.
And we don't have that here. We've got above market for basketball, but we don't have the money of the schools that we're competing against in that sport. And so where that nets us, I don't know. I do think for us, it does mean that we're very interested in Brian Seeley and his work with the College Sports Commission and how he can hold the line on third-party payments, which we suspect the football schools will be using to try to supplement what they can spend for basketball under the rev share formula. So that's just sort of how we think about advantage versus, not.
Mhm.
But that said, I do think for the Big East, the ability to focus 365 days a year on basketball has been a positive for this new group. And whether others, conferences that now have football might go in that direction, I can't speak to that at all. I mean, I think Father Shanley called us a unicorn. I think we're probably that. And I think, but it's very personal, if you will, to a conference as to what sports you're going to make your priority. Secondly, on women's sports, I do think the future for women's basketball is good. I mean, we have, one of the greatest, if not the greatest programs of all time in our league with UConn. It's been an honor for me to have had such a long association with Coach Oriema, who we remember following back in the early 90s. Frankly, one of the reasons that we started the WNBA was so that we could capitalize on what was happening back then in women's college basketball. And we were pointing to the women's Final Four and the UConn-Tennessee rivalry as sort of 1-2 on, what was making women's basketball so great back in the day. And so, I treasure my relationship with Gino. He's my hero in many ways. Few, if any, have done more for women's sports, let alone women's basketball than he has. And so it's an honor to have him and his program associated with our league. I hope that it's hard to invest in sports, and I hope that our schools will continue to invest in women's basketball as our second sport. I do think the quality of play, the appeal of the players as role models, the fact that women like myself who played basketball in college are now in philanthropic years and should be giving back to their former programs can help drive the engine, to use your words. And I do hope that the NCAA can continue its good work in building the women's tournament and that can trickle down to the conference as well, because I do think there are commercial possibilities associated with all women's sports. Howard, you're an expert on this, that are probably unrealized now and are just going to take maybe some time, some investment, expertise, a little more, work societally to get people embracing these women. But I think that's the trajectory that we're clearly on. So whether it's, pro basketball, whether it's soccer, whether it's ice hockey, whether it's volleyball, and of course women's, women's college sports are the biggest producer annually of women's sports, 250,000 women are playing every year under the NCAA umbrella. There's loads of possibility there that I think is untapped. And hopefully, good minds will come together and realize those possibilities in the years ahead.
Appreciate you, Val. Thank you.
Thanks, Howard.
All right, we'll go next to Amanda Kristovich from Front Office Sports.
Hey, Val,
Hi,
congratulations on
thank you.
everything. I know that you said that this decision came over many months, but was there maybe like a moment where you felt, you really had made, you really like, was there a light bulb moment? Could you take us through that? When was it? Where were you? Just paint a picture for us if you could.
Yeah, sure, Amanda. Well, it was sort of a tension, I would say, that had been unfolding because, on one hand, I love this league. I mean, this has been such an honor to do it. I'm so proud of what we've been able to accomplish. I've made sort of opportunities I've had the opportunity of a lifetime to meet some amazing people who I hope will remain friends until my last breath. And I'm so happy that my career has allowed me to remain so deeply involved in the game of basketball at so many different levels. And so that, I think, more than anything, accounted for the 13 years. I mean, when I took this job, it was an original 5-year contract. And, I talked to my husband, Charlie. He's like, okay, sure, that 5 years, we can, we can do that. And then 5 became 8, which became 11. And then my last contract was a little bit shorter because I think I knew in the back of my mind that at some point, for myself and for my family, and just, so that I could sort of do some bucket list things with whatever time I have left on this earth, I would probably reach a point where I would say, I'm ready. The conference is ready. I've done what I can do. I like to say, I feel like I've worked a good shift. That's sort of, we all have that opportunity, and you hope when it's your turn, you work a good one. And so it was really, I think unfolding in part over the last several months. Did not want to sort of deal with this during the basketball season, to be honest. I didn't want the attention to be on anything other than our schools and our successes and the Big East tournament. And, I hope that's where this, this flurry around me, I hope it's short-lived, because that's where really the attention needs to rest with them. And, as I've indicated, I've told Father Shanley and the board, I plan to be around for the next 4 or 5 months. So they're kind of stuck with me. We have a lot to do in the coming weeks, because we have a flurry of spring meetings. We have our Olympic sport calendar in full bloom. The presidents are going to be meeting again at the end of May. We've got stuff in June. And July is a little bit slower for us because we don't have football, but I don't coast, so I'm fully prepared to work with our schools to get done what needs to get done for us at these times of the year, and also to be helpful as they go about the job of identifying my successor and working with them on the transition. So again, it's just been a great run, and one I never dreamed I would have. And I'm just grateful to all the people along the way who have helped make the Big East what it is today, because, they're just sort of, I'm just along for the ride in many cases, especially when it relates to our basketball programs. It's just been a joy to be associated with everyone.
Thanks, Val.
As a reminder, if you have a question, please use the hand raise button. We'll go next to T. Baker from the 9.
Hey, Val, good to see you and
Hey, Steve, good to
congrats.
see you. Thank you.
So following up a bit about, you made a statement earlier that you really don't want to see the women's sports trajectory go backwards. And I'm curious what you believe could be potential sort of like as existential threats to the ongoing growth of women's sports on the collegiate level, and what safeguards need to be put in place by administrators, by athletic directors to ensure that that doesn't happen.
Well, I think my concern, which wouldn't surprise anybody, is that as more money is redirected into football and basketball, and men's basketball in particular, because that's the new set of rules. That's what the House settlement allowed for, which is great for those athletes because they're earning that money and have the right to share in a piece of the pie that's coming out of the revenues in those sports. the concern naturally is, okay, if we're going to direct, if you will, even more money to football and basketball, what does that leave for all the other sports? Are there enough resources? If you assume resources are at the end of the day finite, are there enough resources to make sure that we're maintaining scholarship levels, participation opportunities, quality of treatment, et cetera? And so that's, I don't have the answers to that. I think that's what we're witnessing probably in real time. Are those investments going to continue to be there? I can tell you we have lots of conversations about this at the Big East. I know our schools are fully committed to doing what they need to do under Title IX, number one, but also, our schools care about these young women, and they want to see them thrive. Many of these women are bringing great pride to their schools. They are going to go on and be the leaders of tomorrow. And so it's in our interest to make sure that they're getting the best experience possible on our campuses. And with that, all the leadership training that comes with playing college sports. I mean, that's what happened to me. So I can relate to that. So I think, number one, Title IX will continue to be the safety net. So we have the force of federal law, number one. And number two, I think the advocacy efforts by people that I'm good friends with, organizations like the Women's Sports Foundation, Women Leaders in Sports, people on our campuses, our SWAs, who I want to commend. Some of the finest women I know are senior women administrators for our schools, and I can tell you they care deeply about all of our sports programs, but especially our women's sports programs. So they're going to make sure that we do the right thing. So I do think we have some protections in the system. And at some point, I do think women's sports, I hate to put it this way, but kind of can help themselves. This is what I alluded to earlier. Is there going to be philanthropy coming from former women's college athletes? Because they're the ones, that's what happens on the men's side. These alums are giving back to their programs. They're helping support. We've got, the women have to do that too. Okay. We've got to try to make sure there's commercial opportunities that can be mined for women's sports so they can begin to pay for themselves through ticket sales, or through, sponsorship opportunities, or maybe we can get some better television revenue out of it. All of those things I think are possible. They just need people to focus on that, who are experts in these areas and who stay committed, because, bringing in those sort of, sources of support take a lot of work. And I think if we can do all of that, then we shouldn't have to worry. That I think women's sports will keep going at the collegiate level, and they'll keep growing.
Thank you.
Great. We've got time for two more. Next, we will go to John Fanta from NBC Sports.
Val, when you think about this journey, what's something that you didn't fully understand about the Big East before taking the job that now that you look at the journey, you more than appreciate now? And then what do you want if you were to give the next, whoever that next leader is, what do you want that person to know?
Hi, John Fanta. I would say I didn't really grasp how special the Big East tournament at Madison Square Garden is. When we took over, we didn't know what to expect. And I want to thank Father Shanley and Joe Lasessi and the others, Father Donahue and others, for making that a deal point for the separation from the old league, holding on the rights to play the Big East tournament at Madison Square Garden. We weren't sure what would happen. Some heavy ticket users were gone. We had new schools from the Midwest whose support of that event was unproven. And I just remember sitting there in 2014 with a final between Providence and Creighton. And Father Shanley was part of that when he was at Providence. And Providence winning it all that year with Dave Gavitt looking down, smiling, I know. And yet we had 5,000 people in the building wearing Creighton blue because they were there traveling from Omaha to support Coach McDermott and his son Doug National Player of the Year. And that's when we said, hey, wait a minute, we think this is going to be pretty good. And then every year since, the tournament has grown and has gotten, I don't want to say more exciting because it's always been exciting, but has been, more supported by our current schools. And I just, the importance of that event to our identity, to our connection with New York City, I don't think I fully grasped in the way that I do now. I also, didn't fully grasp, because I sort of I knew how this worked at the NBA and WNBA, the importance of partnerships with all of your network partners. And I have to thank again Fox Sports because they took a bet. They took a bet on the Big East back in 2013 by acquiring the programming. They needed the tonnage. They were launching FS1 the summer of 2013, and so the fates of the two organizations were aligned. They needed each other. And, I can't thank enough Eric Shanks and Larry Jones and now Jordan for supporting this league and for being such great partners. And I really have been able to enjoy the fruits of a successful collaboration with a network partner, first with Fox and now with our good friends at NBC and TNT and ESPN. So I think those pieces I appreciate. In terms of my successor, John, what I had to learn, and I learned it on the job, and I think it got better every year, was the importance of communication with our schools. You know, every day, I think about, okay, like who we have to bring into these decisions. I worked for a very empowered commissioner in David Stern, who was a brilliant guy, who was a visionary, who could see around corners. And, I don't think I fully grasped working for him, all the people he talked to when he made decisions. And that's something I had to learn. And I was taught well by President DeGioia at first, and then Father Shanley and Father Peter and others, how to bring in our presidents and our ADs and our SWAs. And, we certainly wouldn't agree to anything important in this league or approve anything important without the input of our men's basketball or women's basketball coaches. So that's sort of, I guess in college speak, it's called shared governance. But I would just sort of counsel whoever follows, you've got to understand your stakeholders. You've got to understand the environment that you're operating in, how complex it's gotten. You need to pride yourself on good relations with the national office. And I want to commend Charlie Baker and his great team in Indy. We have, our staff has great relationships with them. Dan Gavitt has been a great friend of the Big East. So many people I could tick off here, but that's part of this job too, is the relationships. You just can't function in this space unless you're a relationship builder. And, I've been very lucky to have good relations. I work hard at that. And if you can get that part right, then, I can promise that good things will follow.
Great. We'll close this afternoon or this morning's, still this morning's.
Mike, we have one more question.
Yes, we do. Going to Matt Norlander from CBS Sports.
Hi, good morning.
Hey, Matt.
Appreciate you doing the Zoom, Val. I have a tongue-in-cheek question, which is, did Mr. Paquette reach out and say, "Oh, I see how it is. 1 year without me, and suddenly you're stepping away"? And any input from the great John Paquette?
Yeah, no, not quite, but he's greatly missed. Although Mike LePre's doing an outstanding job, has filled some big shoes for sure. And I guess, Matt, that just speaks to the quality of the people that have come through this place.
Yeah.
I know it sounds so cliche, but I really do. I stand on shoulders here. I mean, it's Dave Gavitt and Mike Tranghese and, Duffy and Shanley, who worked up the first Big East logo, and these great coaches that have come before, and the commissioners that have preceded me, and the great ADs that have come through this league. The guys I have now are among the best in the business. I just, and I don't want to sound overly philosophical, but you know, the only thing certain in life here is change, and it's so painful sometimes, and it's hard sometimes, and I feel a sense of remorse of sort of forcing my change onto others, but I do think that's the way of the world, and I just really hope that when change happens, that people grow from that, they learn from that. People who might not have had an opportunity now get a chance to be the leaders or to step in a bigger way. Um, that's just the nature of things. And, you know, people will have a chance to make their mark, just as I've tried to make mine. And, you know, John Paquette, you know, to use an example, was one of the best of the best. I mean, you know, we still call him when we need a history lesson. And we're thrilled that he, you know, isn't far away, and we brought him back for a few things, and he's, you know, he takes some calls, and I still get notes from him, and they're very much appreciated. So again, if what I'm saying is that the Big East has been about great people, he's exhibit A on that. And, you know, I know that the people that follow me will, you know, add to this great list.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Obviously, Lepre does a wonderful job and was the bright guy to step in. I do want to congratulate you, Val, but my question, not to spin the story forward, but you got a bunch of hacks on here, and we do need to spin the story forward. And I believe Father Shanley might have spoken to this briefly. Billy Donovan came open. Just I missed a part of this call earlier. If I could ask him to briefly speak on a little more specifically, now that we see where the Big East is, and Val, if you want to chime in as well, feel free to. How wide is the candidate pool? I mean, what specific traits are you looking at? Do you want to have a timeline on a successor determined, you know, by the early summer? I just anything that you can possibly give us right now, and what's quite clearly a very critical period of transition for the conference. I know you don't know who it's going to be, but anything that you can provide for us in terms of parameters on this skill set fits the bill. Do they have to have a college athletics background? Are you willing to go outside those parameters to speak to other people? There is a certain person in college athletics right now with the last name that begins with a G, whose father is obviously you know, the most important person arguably in the history of the conference. So anything that you can give us for Val's successor, we would all gladly take here as we wrap the call.
Sure. I think we're open-minded about the profile of the next commissioner of the Big East. I have been working the phones for the last 24 hours with peoples with letters like T and G in them to ask questions about who they think might be good successors to Val. I think, you know, one of the things that Val said, which I could echo very highly, I think Val's great success with us is because of the way she works relationships. Val is really good about building community and consensus between college presidents, network executives, the NCAA office, politics, you name it. Val can work the room. And she does it with a sense of vision. And I don't have a cookie cutter model in my mind. I don't think the other presidents do, and we really haven't talked about it yet. Obviously, I think you want somebody with a sports background, but I've had people introducing themselves to me via email in the last 24 hours who come from very different backgrounds, and we'll see. I think the job is an exciting one because we've proven that we can be successful in the world that we're in. And I will be looking for Val's help in figuring out the next person as well, because nobody knows the job better than she does. But stay tuned. It's going to be a process.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great. And with that, I thank everybody for joining us this afternoon. Thank you to Father Shanley. Thank you to Val. We will have the recording of this event. If you would like the full video, please reach out to me directly and we will send it along. And here's hoping everybody else has a great rest of your day. Thanks so much.
Thank you.